Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Hello, welcome to another podcast of Harvesting Wisdom podcast, and I'm your host, Mike McMahon. Today I have technically a competitor of ours, but there's really no competitors in our space. We need 10 more people like the guy who's is coming on today. His name is Shota Austin. He's with Tank's Green Stuff.
Are you straight?
Okay.
Yeah, but I do. Get that outside so.
Okay. Look straight into the camera. Okay. Yeah, that's just weird looking.
Was that free?
I'm all right.
You're great.
Okay. Hello and welcome to another podcast with Harvesting Wisdom. I'm your host, Mike McMahon, and today I've got a guest who's would be considered a competitor because his company is down in Tucson doing similar stuff that my company does, but realistically, we need about 10 more of these guys, of 10 more Shotas on the planet, just in our area. So there is no competition. It's the more we have, the better. And Shota is with Tank's Green Stuff down in Tucson. He's also the treasurer for the Arizona Compost Council. And welcome today, Shota.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you all inviting me to be on your podcast. It's nice to see you again, Mike.
Yeah, good seeing you. Shota, I'd normally start off just kind of framing who my guest is and what he does, what his background is. So share with us that. Better for you to talk about that than me to read it as a bio.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Arizona born and raised. I grew up in Tempe. I grew up doing some farming in the Maricopa area, and I ended up going to the University of Arizona to study agricultural business management and economics. And during my time at the University of Arizona, a cousin of mine was working for the U of A Compost Cats, and they were looking for a heavy equipment operator and tech. And because I had that background working on a farm growing up, I got involved with the U of A Compost Cats, and that's how I got started in the composting industry back in 2012.
Yeah, so let me ask a question. I'm going to ask a big question, but first, tell me a little about Tank's Green Stuff and what you guys. You don't just compost,
No.
and maybe you do just compost, but you compost, as far as I know, a variety of different things. So tell me a little about what you guys do down there.
So Tank's Green Stuff, or some folks might know it from back in the day, is the Fairfax Companies. It was started in 1986, and we started doing land reclamation projects and landfilling. And over the years, to extend the life of our landfills, we decided to start doing things like cardboard, metal, plastic recycling, and eventually around 2010, Jason Tankersley, the current owner, or one of the current owners of Tank's Green Stuff, decided he was going to keep all of the organic material out of his landfill and started composting. And so we started our composting and Tank's Green Stuff as a brand in 2010. And at our facilities here in Southern Arizona, we accept landscape trimmings from public and private businesses, as well as the public itself, for our composting operation. When our composting facility, or at our composting facility, we use material we call clean green, which is a blend of landscape trimmings that are free of lawn clippings, trash, cactus, or palm. And so we only use the very nicest of our landscape debris in our composting operation. And in that compost, we add a little dairy manure, organic dairy manure, as well as some beneficial microbiology and some elemental sulfur, and we started making compost. When we first started producing compost and starting to sell compost, we found out pretty quick that we couldn't sell compost in the quantities and the price points to compete with the big box store producers. And so At Tanks, we took a little bit of a different tact. We decided we're going to make some of the nicest compost you've ever seen in Arizona. And so our products are a little bit more expensive. But when you open a bag of Tanks Green Stuff organic compost, you're going to see what you're paying for in that bag. And we let our product do the talking. And that mindset goes through our entire product line. And so we've developed a whole product line of bulk and bag products that are designed specifically to allow Arizona gardeners and growers to be more successful in our challenging environment.
Wow. Okay. So I didn't even understand. I didn't know that when Tankersley started that he was in doing landfill work and remediation there, but and then it turned into the compost.
Yeah.
And as you know, there's lots of different stuff. It sounds like you're doing a lot of yard waste compost, but you're cleaning it, and that's one of the big challenges too. Getting getting it separated at the source, and/or training landscapers that they have to give you a clean product, or you. I imagine you're like everyone who really is looking for quality. You say, you know, if you start giving me contaminants, I'm gonna not allow you to bring your material here anymore, or you're gonna charge back or something. How do you control that? And you have to have people at the gate watching what goes in too, right? So, and that's the hardest part, I think, to me. It's the hardest part of recycling. It's the hardest part of composting, and it's an easy step, but somehow as a culture we don't do that. But anyway, tell me about that.
I know that's where in other parts of the United States, especially states like California and Washington and Oregon, you know, recycling is a lot more mainstream and common practice. And so we run into it all the time here in Arizona, where we have people from out of state move to Arizona and they ask, hey, where's the composting? So in other parts of the United States and other parts of the world, recycling, keeping the feedstocks or the waste streams clean is part of the culture. You know, you tell somebody, hey, you can't put that in the recycling, they're not going to put it in the recycling, right? I remember as a child growing up in Japan, I once put the plastic bottle in the wrong recycling bin, and a neighbor came by, knocked on the front door, and told my grandfather, hey, your grandson put the plastic bottle in the wrong plastic. I must have put like a number 2 and a number 4 bin, you know. And it's part of the culture there where it's just normal that you recycle. It's normal that you follow the rules.
And the community comes together and accepts it, right?
Exactly. But here in Arizona, it's not so ingrained. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to educate our customers and our community about, you know, if you have a clean material, then we can charge you a lesser fee, because we can then turn it into compost that enriches our community and our environment. Where if you bring us something that's got a lot of trash in it, we're going to have to turn you away, or you're going to mess up our opportunity to make change in our community.
You had said, what you alluded to when we first started talking here was that the quality, and it's really hard. I've had lots of farmers, and you know, our price associated water can be expensive at times as well. A big part of it is the logistics of moving bulk, but I've looked at, they've told me, look, I'm getting my material from this other source, and then I take and I analyze the product that they're getting, and it's horrible. I told them I would pay not to put it on my property, and you're doing damage to whatever you're trying to grow. But then also, on top of it, they have a lot of contaminants in there, and to make it contaminant free is a real critical part of the product. And I know down in Tucson, my daughter's a doctor down there, and I go down, and I've met a lot of different farmers and people down in that area, and I know that you guys are really well respected, and you're right off the 10, right?
Yeah, we have 3 facilities in the Tucson area.
Right. So real accessible, really good product. And I mean, if you put on a product that is $20 a bag and the competitor has one for 10, but yours works and theirs doesn't, you know, it's a value proposition, right? So you're saying that a fair amount of your stuff comes from the green waste. We know that most product is clean wood fiber. Most things grow with clean wood fiber until you start getting into maybe more specialty, products, vegetables and fruits and things like that, where you need some other products. And you're talking about adding sulfur, which in Arizona is usually something we need to, to
Help
battle
balance
what,
the pH.
the pH stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
you also mentioned dairy manure. Are you working with them with one dairy, and is that more of a product that helps with your blend, or do you sell a dairy product as well?
So we offer two different products. We offer a product with manure and without manure in it, based on just customer feedback and preference.
Yeah,
The end products aren't too far apart from each other because we don't use a whole lot of manure in our
right.
compost. It's just a little bit for that extra kick of nitrogen that just helps get the composting process going.
Yeah,
And then the final end user is going to get a little bit more nitrogen. But I'm sure you're aware, my compost is not a fertilizer or a nutrient source, so it
right.
doesn't
And
make a huge
you're not
impact.
putting synthetics in. You don't have any human
Mhm.
compost.
Yeah.
Are you guys doing any food composting at all?
No, so due to our permitting and just the challenges and the expense of permitting and the capital infrastructure required to do food waste composting, that's something we do at the moment. Now,
Right.
it's something that hopefully someday we might be able to do, but at the moment, the city of Tucson here in Tucson is food waste composting, and they're seeming to get better and better at it every year and learning how to get it done. So,
So I've found talking to composters all over the country, um, that I mean it's a challenge to try to make money with it. And the biggest part I think to me has always been logistics,
mhm,
selling it in bulk, because if you're providing a large quantity to a farmer, the trucking is more than the actual compost product, right? So
yeah.
um, the I guess that's a big part of it. And I don't know what breakdown you guys do that's commercial or
Mhm.
certified organic versus small farmers and small gardeners and retail. But you have a pretty good mix then going.
Yeah, we have a pretty good mix, but that's where, for large scale application, the trucking of compost and organic material to put in the field just is astronomically pricey. Like, when you're looking at it, oh, we got 1,000 acres to do, you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars in trucking alone to
Right.
bring that material in, unless you're really close to the compost producer. And that's where producing compost and getting compost out into the industrial agricultural setting really requires there to be a composter local and close, with less than 50 miles away from you to really make it worthwhile to use in the field because it's just so pricey to truck it.
And we do a lot of our podcast really is about agriculture and it's about soil.
Mhm.
And for me, you have to have the organic in the soil.
You do, yeah.
And it's just that's a big thing. And um, I've read studies where 5% organic
Mhm.
is really good. It's what you should have. But here in the desert, we have some of these properties that we work with. They don't even have a 0.5%. So
Mhm.
when you don't have that organic, uh, you don't have the resilience for disease. You also can't absorb rain, so you end up being hydrophobic and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
What if somebody were to ask why compost? Why would you use compost? What is your, and I'm sure people ask that.
Yeah.
Why bother with compost? So what's your answer to that?
Well, the bottom line is, compost is organic material, and it's harnessing nature's natural ability to break down organic material, right? If we look at it in terms of, oh, we're going to walk into a forest, right? And we look at the forest floor, we've got a layer of sticks and leaves that fell down. If we dig down a little bit further, we've got those sticks and leaves that are broken down. We dig down a little bit further, and we're going to find nice, rich, loamy soil that's rich in organic material, right? And
Right.
that's nature's natural way of providing organic material for the forest. And that's a continuous cycle that just keeps going and going and going on. And so when you're looking at growing in a field in an agricultural setting, I know we've moved quite a far ways from growing like nature originally intended. But, I think we lose a lot of the benefits and the natural processes to promote healthy plants when we don't add organic material to the soil. So adding compost to soil is bringing that natural component on how those plants have evolved to grow back into the soil, right? And adding organic material to the soil, and especially here in the the Southwest and in Arizona, it introduces that beneficial microbiology that helps to, like you mentioned, increases the soil's ability to support plant life, which allows for it to naturally fight off pests, fight off disease. It naturally allows for the water to stay in the soil, so you have less water usage and you can grow a healthier crop using less water, right? And then, of course, you have better nutrient uptake. The industrial agricultural setting is designed based around chemical fertilizer and providing the appropriate nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium for something to grow. But if you really dig into soil science and soil health, you find out that nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is just the tip of the pyramid. It's just the very tippy top that we think about. And so adding that organic material basically allows us to use more of the nutrients, a wider spectrum of the nutrients that allows us to grow healthier food that's happier and tastier. Something like a great example I bring up for customers that are growing tomatoes, right? If you were just to go on the Google and type in, hey, what pH do tomatoes grow in? You're going to get an answer that says 5.5 to 6.5 is the ideal range for tomatoes to grow in.
We don't have
so
that.
We'll get, right, you get backyard gardeners that call and say, hey, what pH is the soil that you guys sell? We're trying to grow tomatoes. And my answer to them is like, it really doesn't matter what my soil pH is, because you're not going to keep it at 5.5 to 6.5.
And you can only put so much compost on at a time. So it's when you're taking 6 inches of soil and you're putting a half inch of compost maybe on top that eventually blends in, we're kind of an afterthought. And on top of it, it all has to do with the water, right? The water is not, it's alkaline as well. But
exactly.
So yeah, all of these things, you and I can talk forever about this kind of thing, and for us it's kind of second nature. But for a person anywhere in the country who's watching these series and they're like, should I get into composting, and what do I have to do to be a commercial composter? I have my own insights. A big part of it is you almost need tipping fees. If you don't get tipping fees, it really becomes a challenge. The other thing is there is composters, and there's composters, and then there's composters, and then there's compost and compost and compost, right? So I have found, we've done everything wrong a few times, and you guys probably have done it as well, but if you buy a wood fiber and it's not thoroughly composted, you got problems. For that first crop you're growing, the soil is going, the nitrogen is going into the compost to finish composting down. So how that gets composted, people just don't understand or appreciate, and why it's so important. Another thing is the amount of water. You don't need to compost, turn and get it heated with water for a long, long time, but you do have to use a fair amount of water and how you apply it. So those are the things that my concept. What would your tips be for someone who wants to be a composter? You tell them to get it to law school, or what would you say?
Well, the first thing is to join the Arizona Composting Council.
Oh, if you're in Arizona. If you're in
Arizona.
Right.
If you're not in Arizona, get involved with the U.S. Composting Council, and they can direct you to your local state chapter, and you can get involved and learn about the industry, because every state is a little bit different, right? Here in Arizona, we don't have the tipping fees, right? Tipping fees are usually set kind of by local municipalities, and their facilities kind of set the standard for the tipping fees. So I was just talking to my cousin the other day. She lives in Portland. The tipping fees there are $145, and she's like, that's really cheap, because she just moved to Portland from Seattle, where it's $200 a ton to tip, right? But here in Arizona, in southern Arizona, our tipping fees are in that $30 to $40 range, which makes it very expensive to compost, because it's so much cheaper to landfill.
Even from what we get, that's high. Yeah, I mean, it's, and you need that, right? I mean, that's a big part of the component. And one of the reasons why is that we're not regenerating any of our soils. So the difference between compost and fertilizer, fertilizer goes in to feed a plant during its
Right.
plant cycle. You can grow it. Most fertilizers are very singular dimension, right? They're the macro nutrient, whereas compost has a complete host or list of nutrients, all your microbiology, your secondary macro. So, but compost also is good for the soil because it releases over a long period of time, and it's got benefits for up to 5 years. Where, if you don't uptake that fertilizer while you're growing that first crop rotation, any unused fertilizer turns into a nitrate or a pollution, right? So, but you just brought up something great, which is the Arizona Compost Council, and you were one of the founding members, and you guys had a great year. Last year, we created that. Tell me a little about that, and tell me what you do in your position as treasurer.
Yeah, so Tanks Green Stuff is a founding member of the Arizona Composting Council, and we got this off the ground last year in April. So it's been just a little bit over a year that the Arizona Composting Council's been in existence. My role as the treasurer is to keep tabs on the money and pay the bills, and let the rest of the executive team and our board know when we can and cannot spend money. So that's pretty much what I do with that. Is I just keep tabs on the money and make
So
sure that we're spending it in the right ways and that we can afford to do the things we want to do.
And we talked about some of the difficulties in the compost world. You need tipping fees. And one of the reasons we do it is because we don't show the value or the need for the compost in our agriculture, our farms, right? So farmers are in a commodity business right now where composting is a little too expensive. We don't realize how much the government has subsidized some of the early fertilizer companies and some of the farmers. And farmers are at a point where they're not really replenishing their soil because in fertilizer, you don't really have organic, right? You have
You
just
don't
the
have any
fertilizer.
hardly at all.
So we're borrowing from the future, and we're not taking into account what it means to replenish those soils. And a lot of farmers are smart guys. They'll rotate crops and things like that, which certainly help with fertility. And a lot of times they'll leave their crop residue in the field, and that's organic as well. So in an ideal world, you might start with compost and only have to use it maybe every 3 years or 4 years. But what is that to you? What does it mean to be climate smart or regenerative as a farmer? And how does that fit into this whole idea of circular economy?
Composting in the climate situation is kind of what we're getting after.
Sure.
Yeah, well, the thing of it is that we're losing our topsoil and our basically carbon out of the soil
Right.
year after year after year after year, right? Because every time we till, every time we don't or fail to reincorporate that organic material basically just turns into carbon. The long and the short of it is that we're not part of nature when we don't add that organic material back in, and we're fighting against it. And it's just a matter of time where things go really, really badly for us. And so in terms of composting here in Arizona in the Southwest, it's about getting it back in the soil. It's about rebuilding that soil health for future generations so we can continue to farm, we can continue to grow our food locally. I think the future for us really holds true that our food needs to come from a lot closer to us than it does now, right? Like our food, luckily in Arizona, we grow a lot of produce here, and we're pretty close to where a lot of produce is grown. But I think that needs to change a lot because the hauling and the storage of produce across the entire country is very expensive and very resource intensive and creates quite a bit of pollution. And as Joe talked about at one of our events recently, or Ollie as well talked about, I think that almost 50% of the food produced in this country never makes it to the plate and just goes to waste. And so I think restructuring and looking at how our agricultural system supports us and supports our future it's a huge tipping point we're at now, where we really need to start pulling things together and looking at how we're doing things. And just because we did things the way we have for the last 50, 60, 70 years doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right way to move forward.
Right. That's true. And we have a sandy soil here, so adding organic really matters. It slows down the use of water. I'm sure you've done tests with a lot of your products. We've got some products out there that we've tested, and we can show that we're saving about 50% of the water, which is no little thing, right? So
that's a huge amount.
Yeah, I'm sure you've done the same thing with your products, and you understand that. Our water is also kind of subsidized here in Arizona, but if you're in California, you see the high cost of water, and you don't have to. You just have to open your eyes to see that there's drought worldwide. We see it in Africa, we see it a lot of places. But I was just in Kentucky, where drought's not the problem. They get so much rain, and they get they've got a clay soil, and it's more acidic. But the crazy thing is, the organic works there too, because it acts as a bulking agent. It helps with keeping that clay from tightening up, and it also helps with drainage, right? So it's kind of like the solution we all know, everybody knows. It's just, when is society ready to accept how much of a catastrophe do we have to have before we start making changes? And it is a lot harder to start from a dead soil and bring it back to life than it is just to maintain it and follow more of a regenerative part. So I think that's a big part of what you're trying to do with the Arizona Compost Council. Part of it is to make compost, we have to be able to make money. We have to be part of the system, and also for farmers to actually keep their land without degrading their land and leaving it in good shape for the next generation is a big part of it. But it's almost like farmers, they know it, but there's nothing they can do because the system is kind of stacked against them. The Arizona Compost Council is about awareness, right? But it's also about making regulatory changes, and that's
making policy change, trying to make some big changes, whether it's anywhere from just raising awareness about the effects of compost and the solutions that compost provides to our community and our area and the world as a whole, but also working towards making those policy changes to make compost a realistic solution, right?
Yeah.
Like we didn't become the agricultural industry didn't become what it was today on its own. It had help.
Oh my God, it's been the biggest subsidy. We've subsidized transportation and agriculture in this country, and we have to. That's the thing, even to do this. But what policies that the Arizona chapter was the fastest chapter to be put together in the U.S. Under the U.S. Compost Council. So you guys did a tremendous job, and part of it is we don't look at each other as silos. I'm certainly not competing with Waste Management or with you guys in your market, and I believe that we need about 100 times more composters, maybe 1,000 times, to supply what we need to do to help our soil. So part of it is the fact that you guys all came together. So tell me about the speed of that, and tell me, I think you guys have started with your first initiative, right? What is that?
Yeah, so we're currently working on putting together our first policy paper. I know Joe Roselle is kind of upfront on that one there and taking charge. And our goal with our first policy is to put some policy in place for compost and water usage, trying to limit the water usage and conserve that resource with compost, right? Whether it's agriculture, you can look at it as golf courses in golf, right? That's big business in Arizona, and they all could certainly use a little bit more compost. And there's just all these areas where we use a lot of water to grow stuff, whether it's from someone's backyard or out to the field where we're growing cotton, alfalfa, or lettuce, or what have you. And we can all stand to use a little less water and make the most of the water we are using. And compost is the key to making that happen. And so our policy is based off of that line of thinking. And we're hoping to have something put together here shortly to share with everybody.
Yeah, and it's a bit of an uphill challenge, and any business is an uphill challenge, right? But I think we all drank out of the same Kool-Aid, and we know that this is important for the planet. So that's to answer the question that people ask sometimes, because it's difficult, and they ask, well, why do you care? And I'll ask you the same question: why bother? What's your answer to why bother?
Why bother? Oh, that's an easy one, Mike. It's like you're going to work for a wage. You might as well do something that can make change.
That's a great way and incentive to talk about people who want jobs that have fulfillment, right, and can make change. So I appreciate you being here today, Shota Austin, Tanks Green Stuff, and from the Arizona Compost Council. Thank you for being here, and we'll be definitely seeing more of you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity. You have a wonderful afternoon.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.